Welcome to HFY Fiction Journey. If you're into epic battles, aliens who can't believe how tough humans are, and a soldier who wakes up from a coma just to punch more aliens, then you're in the right place. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe because you never know when humanity might need you to fight off an alien invasion from your couch. Let's dive into today's story where one human soldier, Davis, decides that taking a nap isn't nearly as important as finishing the fight. You've got to be kidding me. That human just moved. The medical bay was silent for a moment, aside from the steady hum of alien machines. Dr. Relic, a Slan physician, spoke with disbelief and concern. The towering figure on the bed, a human soldier, had been in a coma for weeks. No one expected him to recover this soon. Another doctor, a Morith with twitching antennae, approached cautiously. Humans are full of surprises, but movement this soon seems unlikely. He tapped on his scanner, showing a faint spike in neural activity. The figure on the bed groaned softly. Dr. Relic nearly dropped his equipment. Impossible. He's still healing. The human had sustained serious injuries from an attack on a nearby moon. The rogue Shikaar, a vicious faction that had broken away from the Intergalactic Alliance, had ambushed the squad. It wasn't a battle. It was a massacre. The Shikaar were known for their brutality, their attacks cold and ruthless. But this human wasn't just a victim. He had taken down most of the attackers before they overwhelmed him. Weeks had passed since the attack, and the alien medics had done everything to keep him alive. The fact that he survived at all was a testament to human resilience. But no one expected him to wake. Not today. As the medics exchanged uneasy glances, the human moved again. His hand twitched, then clenched into a fist, knuckles turning white. There was tension in his face, a sense of urgency. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused, darting around the sterile room before locking on to Dr. Relic. Where am I? His voice was hoarse, barely audible, like someone who hadn't spoken in years. You're safe, Dr. Relic stammered, still trying to process what was happening. You're in a medical facility, an Allied outpost. You've been in a coma since the battle. The human soldier's eyes sharpened at the mention of the battle. The Shikaar. His voice trailed off as memories flooded back. His squad, his men, the children he left behind when he signed up to fight. He winced, the thought of his family hitting him like a physical blow. Dr. Relic stepped closer. You need to rest. You've been through. They're still out there, aren't they? The human interrupted, his voice growing stronger. The Shikaar, you didn't stop them, did you? The two alien doctors exchanged uneasy glances. We've been holding them off, the Morith said. But your priority should be recovering. They won't reach us here. The human swung his legs off the bed, pain flashing through his body. He grimaced but forced through it. They will. They always do. And I'm not letting them win. Dr. Relic tried to place a hand on his shoulder. Please, you're in no condition. I'm not dying here, the human growled, standing fully. His knees buckled for a moment, but he caught himself. His face hardened with resolve, showing no sign of the injuries he had endured. This wasn't just a soldier standing before them. It was a father. The thought of his children filled his mind, giving him strength. They were the reason he fought. They were the reason he had survived. The Shikaar had taken too much from him already, and there was no way he would let them threaten his family, no matter how far away it seemed from this distant outpost. They've got to pay, he muttered under his breath, eyes narrowing. I'm finishing what they started, Dr. Relic sighed, pulling out his scanner. Your body is still damaged, and there's no guarantee. I don't need guarantees, the human said, taking a few staggering steps forward, still shaky but determined. I need to fight. I need to end this. The Morith doctor blinked nervously. But your injuries, we have to. Get me my gear, the human cut him off. I don't have time to lie around. Davis's eyes turned cold. They took everything from me, he said, his voice low and steady. My squad, my friends, I've seen their brutality up close. You haven't. I know what they'll do if they get through this outpost. They'll burn everything to the ground. He gripped his rifle tighter. And then they'll move on to Earth. It may be far, but if we don't stop them here, they'll keep coming. This doesn't end until they're gone. Dr. Relic didn't respond. He couldn't. The intensity in Davis's voice was overwhelming. Davis moved past him, heading for the exit. The outpost was already buzzing with activity. Soldiers from different allied species were rushing to their stations, preparing for the attack. The distant explosions were getting louder, and the sound of alien weapons charging filled the air. As Davis moved through the chaos, he could feel the stares of the other soldiers. They knew who he was, the human who had taken down half of a Shikaar assault team before being brought down himself. But Davis didn't care about their looks. He wasn't here for glory. He was here for revenge. A massive reptilian soldier with shimmering scales stepped into his path. "You should be in the med bay, not out here," it growled, its voice deep and rumbling. Davis didn't break his stride. "I've got work to do." The reptilian narrowed its eyes but stepped aside. "Then do what you must, human." The words hung in the air as Davis stepped onto the battlefield. The area outside the outpost was already littered with debris from earlier skirmishes. Craters scarred the ground, smoke billowed into the sky, and the eerie hum of Shikaar ships filled the air. In the distance, Davis could see them, the Shikaar forces swarming toward the outpost. Their ships were sleek, black, and predatory, gliding just above the ground. Behind them, foot soldiers marched in perfect unison, their sharp, angular bodies moving with deadly precision. The sight made Davis's blood boil. His calm buzzed in his ear. "Davis, we've got incoming on the east flank," a voice said. It was one of the outpost commanders, a veteran of many battles against the Shikaar. "On it," Davis replied, heading in that direction. His legs screamed in protest with every step, but he ignored the pain. His children's faces flashed through his mind again, their laughter echoing in his memory. It was that thought that kept him going. When Davis reached the east flank, it was already under heavy fire. Alien soldiers were pinned down, taking severe losses as the Shikaar advanced. Plasma bolts zipped through the air. Explosions rocked the ground, and the metallic screeches of the enemy echoed across the battlefield. Davis dropped to one knee behind a piece of rubble, surveying the scene. The Shikaar were advancing quickly, overwhelming the defenders. If they broke through this line, the outpost wouldn't last much longer. He leveled his rifle, took a deep breath, and aimed at the nearest Shikaar soldier. Time seemed to slow as he squeezed the trigger. The plasma bolt hit the Shikaar square in the chest, sending it crashing to the ground. Another shot, another enemy down. Davis moved with precision, honed by years of combat, picking off targets one by one. But there were too many. His calm crackled again. "We're being overrun. Fall back." Davis gritted his teeth. "Not yet." He sprinted forward, diving into the fray. Plasma bolts whizzed past him, but he pushed through determined. His body was screaming in pain, but he couldn't stop. Not for himself, but for his children. For Earth. The closest Shikaar barely had time to react before Davis was upon them. He fired at point-blank range, taking down two more before slamming the butt of his rifle into the face of a third. The alien screeched as it crumpled to the ground. Still, more kept coming, and so did Davis. He moved like a man possessed, the chaos around him fading into background noise as he focused on one thing: stopping the Shikaar. His rifle fired with deadly accuracy, every shot hitting its mark. His body screamed for rest, his muscles burning, but he didn't care. The stakes were too high. A Shikaar soldier lunged at him, claws outstretched, but Davis ducked low, driving his shoulder into its midsection and sending it sprawling. Before it could recover, he fired twice into its chest, finishing the job. More Shikaar swarmed toward him, but Davis welcomed it. This was what he was built for, war. His calm crackled again, nearly drowned out by the explosions around him. "Davis, we're losing ground on the west side. We can't hold them much longer." Davis fired a few more shots before retreating to a new vantage point. He glanced toward the west. The outpost was barely holding together, smoke rising from several damaged sections. The Shikaar were pressing hard on all fronts. The defenders were outnumbered, and it was only a matter of time before they were overrun. "I'll hold them off," Davis growled into the comm, "but you need to get everyone else out. If this place falls, we can't let them get to the colony." There was a brief pause before the voice replied, "You're outnumbered. You won't survive if you stay behind." "I know," Davis said, already sprinting toward the west flank. "Just get them out of here. This is my fight now." He cut off the comms before anyone could argue. When Davis reached the western side of the battlefield, the situation was worse than he had imagined. The Shikaar were advancing in waves, their sleek forms darting through the battlefield with terrifying speed. The few remaining defenders were barely holding the line, pinned down by overwhelming firepower. Davis crouched behind a pile of debris, his mind racing. He didn't have much time. He glanced at the approaching Shikaar, knowing that if they broke through, nothing would stop them from reaching the human colony, his family, his children. His heart pounded in his chest as he pulled a small device from his belt, a detonator. It was a last resort, something he had hoped never to use. The outpost power core was directly beneath this section. One explosion could wipe out everything within a 2-mile radius, including him, but it would also take the Shikaar with it. He steeled himself, his fingers brushing the activation button. This was it, no turning back. But suddenly, the ground shook beneath him as a massive explosion tore through the eastern side of the outpost. Davis snapped his head toward the source, eyes narrowing. Reinforcements had arrived, human reinforcements. Out of the smoke and debris, a squad of heavily armed human soldiers emerged, their rifles blazing as they charged into the fight. The tide of the battle began to turn as the Shikaar were forced to retreat under the onslaught of concentrated firepower. Davis allowed himself a small, grim smile. It wasn't over yet. With renewed energy, he jumped back into the fight, joining the reinforcements and pushing the Shikaar back. Plasma bolts flew in every direction, the battlefield erupting into chaos, but the humans were relentless. Davis moved with them, cutting through enemy ranks with brutal precision. The Shikaar forces, once confident in their overwhelming numbers, were now faltering. A large Shikaar commander charged at Davis, its multiple limbs armed with plasma blades. The creature let out a high-pitched screech, ready to strike. Davis didn't flinch. He sidestepped the first attack, bringing his rifle up and firing point-blank into the commander's abdomen. The alien staggered but wasn't finished. It swung a massive arm at him, knocking the rifle from his hands and sending him sprawling to the ground. For a moment, everything went black. The sounds of battle became distant and muffled. But then, as if driven by pure instinct, Davis pushed himself to his feet, locking eyes on the advancing commander. His body screamed in pain, but he ignored it. With nothing but a combat knife, Davis charged. The commander swung again, but Davis ducked low, slashing at its underbelly. The creature screeched in pain, staggering back. Before it could recover, Davis leapt onto its back, driving the knife deep into the base of its neck. The alien thrashed violently, trying to shake him off, but he held on, twisting the blade with all his strength. With a final, guttural cry, the commander collapsed lifeless. Davis rolled off its back, panting heavily. His vision blurred again, but he forced himself to stay focused. The Shikaar were retreating, their lines breaking under the relentless human assault. The battle was won, but it had come at a cost. He staggered to his feet, looking around at the smoking battlefield. Bodies of fallen aliens littered the ground, and the outpost was in ruins. The reinforcements had secured the area, but Davis could feel his strength fading fast. The adrenaline that had kept him going was wearing off, and his injuries were catching up with him. One of the human soldiers approached him, a young man with wide eyes and a look of awe. "Sir, you took down the commander. You saved us." Davis gave a small nod, but his thoughts were elsewhere. "Did they make it?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "The evac. Did they get out?" The soldier nodded. "Yeah, everyone made it out. The colony's safe." Davis exhaled, relief washing over him like a wave. His children were safe. That was all that mattered. But as he stood there, swaying on his feet, he realized he was at his limit. His vision darkened at the edges, and the world around him tilted. He collapsed to his knees, the weight of everything finally catching up with him. The soldier rushed forward to catch him, but Davis held up a hand, stopping him. "It's okay," he muttered, his voice barely a whisper. "I did what I had to." As the medics rushed to his side, Davis allowed himself to close his eyes, his mind drifting to the image of his children. He had kept his promise. He had protected them. And that was enough.